Your soulmate is already married. Those words may have stopped you for a moment. Maybe you felt your heart tighten. Maybe you immediately thought of someone specific. Maybe you wondered why this message found you now, especially when something inside you has already been asking questions you have not been able to answer. But before you decide what this means, take a breath. This is not a message telling you to chase someone who belongs to another commitment. It is not a command to interfere with a marriage, destroy a family, or build your future around someone else's promises. Sometimes a powerful connection enters your life not because you are supposed to possess the person, but because the connection reveals something inside you that was waiting to be understood. And something happened last night that changes the way this entire story needs to be seen. You may not know what happened yet. You may never have been told, but somewhere in the quiet space of another person's life, a realization began to form. They were surrounded by familiar things. Familiar walls. Familiar routines. Familiar conversations. Familiar responsibilities. Everything looked normal from the outside, yet inside, something felt different. They could not explain it. They tried to continue their evening as though nothing had changed, but their mind kept returning to a question they had been avoiding for longer than they wanted to admit. Why did they still think about you? Why did your name still carry an emotional weight they could not easily explain? Why did certain memories return when they least expected them, and why, after everything they had chosen, did one particular thought suddenly become impossible to ignore? They realized that avoiding a feeling does not always make it disappear. Sometimes avoidance only makes the feeling quieter until one unexpected moment brings it back to the surface. That may have been what happened last night. Something reminded them of you. Maybe it was a song, maybe it was a place, maybe it was an old conversation, maybe someone casually mentioned something that made them remember the way you used to speak. The way you listened, or the way you made them feel understood. Perhaps it was something much smaller. A familiar phrase, a photograph, a dream, a memory that arrived without permission. Whatever the trigger was, it opened a door inside them that they had spent a long time keeping closed, and suddenly, they were forced to face something uncomfortable. Their life had moved forward, but their emotions had not completely followed. That does not automatically mean their marriage is false. It does not automatically mean you are destined to be with them. It does not mean they are going to leave their spouse. It means only that human emotions can be complicated, and sometimes people discover unresolved feelings at the most unexpected moments. Last night may have been one of those moments. They sat with the realization longer than they expected. At first, they resisted it. They told themselves they were simply remembering the past. They told themselves that everyone has memories. They told themselves that thinking about someone does not mean anything. They tried to explain it away. But then another thought came. What if I never really understood what that connection meant? That question changed everything, not because it gave them an answer, because it made them realize they had been avoiding the question itself, and somewhere in that silence, they remembered you, not an imaginary version of you, not a perfect version. You, the person who had flaws, the person who had feelings, the person who probably wondered whether the connection meant anything at all, the person who may have walked away without ever receiving the explanation you deserved. That memory hit differently, because sometimes what hurts most is not losing someone. Sometimes what hurts most is never understanding why something felt so meaningful. You may have wondered whether you imagined it. Maybe you questioned your own intuition. Maybe you told yourself you were being foolish. Maybe you tried to move on. Maybe you prayed for clarity. Maybe you stopped asking. And perhaps that is why this message feels strangely timed. Because there are moments when closure does not arrive through another person's confession. Sometimes closure arrives when you finally understand yourself. The person you once thought was your soulmate may have been a chapter, a mirror, a lesson, or an invitation to grow. Or perhaps the connection is still meaningful in a way neither of you understood. But meaning does not always equal possession. Love does not always mean claiming someone. And destiny should never require you to violate your values. That is the part nobody tells you when they speak about soulmates. A soulmate connection, if you believe in such things, does not have to mean this person must become mine. Sometimes it means, this person awakened something in me, something you had forgotten, something you had buried, something you needed to learn, something that helped you understand what you truly want from life. And perhaps last night, your person began to understand that too. They began thinking about the difference between responsibility and emotion, between memory and action, between longing and commitment, between what they feel and what they choose, and that distinction matters, because a feeling can be real without becoming an instruction, a thought can be powerful without becoming a decision, a connection can matter without requiring someone to break a promise. That may be the deeper message hidden inside what happened. They may have realized that you affected them, but they may also have realized that affecting someone does not give either person permission to create unnecessary pain. And this is where the story becomes more surprising, because you may have expected their next move to be toward you. Instead, their next move may have been inward. They began looking at themselves. They began asking difficult questions. What had they been avoiding? What had they been pretending not to feel? What did they actually want from their life? Were they living honestly? Were they keeping promises for the right reasons? Were they treating everyone involved with respect? And most importantly, were they taking responsibility for their own choices? Those questions can be uncomfortable, but sometimes discomfort is the beginning of honesty. Last night, something may have shifted in them because they finally stopped trying to make every emotion disappear. They simply observed it. They allowed themselves to admit, yes, I remember this person. Yes, that connection mattered to me. Yes, part of me still wonders what might have happened. And then came the harder realization. Wondering about another life does not mean they should abandon the life they currently have. It means they need to understand why the question exists. That is maturity. That is responsibility. That is where genuine transformation begins. And perhaps you need the same permission. You are allowed to admit that someone mattered to you without making them your entire future. You are allowed to miss someone without chasing them. You are allowed to remember someone without reopening an old wound. You are allowed to care while still protecting your peace. You are allowed to believe that something was meaningful without needing proof that it was destined. Because your life is bigger than one relationship, your future is bigger than one person's decision, your worth does not depend on whether someone chooses you. Read that again. Your worth does not depend on whether someone chooses you. If someone is meant to share your life, that relationship should be built with honesty, freedom, respect, and mutual choice, not secrecy, not manipulation, not emotional games, not waiting endlessly for someone who cannot give you a clear place in their life. You deserve clarity. You deserve respect. You deserve a relationship where you do not have to wonder whether you are someone's secret. And perhaps this is why the event from last night matters, not because it proves that your soulmate will suddenly appear at your door, not because it guarantees a dramatic reunion, but because something inside this story is asking you to stop measuring your future by someone else's uncertainty. Maybe they thought about you last night. Maybe they realized something. Maybe they remembered something they had buried. But the most important question is not what they did. The most important question is what you will do with your life now. Will you continue waiting? Will you continue interpreting every coincidence as a promise? Will you continue checking for signs while forgetting to listen to your own needs? Or will you allow yourself to become emotionally free? There is a difference between hope and waiting. Hope says, my future can still be beautiful. Waiting says, my future cannot begin until this person comes back. Choose hope, always choose hope, because hope leaves room for life. And life has a way of surprising you when you stop trying to force the outcome. Maybe the person you once called your soulmate will eventually come back into your life in an honest and appropriate way. Maybe they will never return. Maybe you will meet someone else who understands you more deeply than you expected. Maybe the lesson will become more valuable than the relationship ever was. You do not have to know which one it will be today. You only have to keep moving forward. There is another detail about last night that may matter. The realization may not have happened during a dramatic conversation. It may have happened during silence. That is often when truth becomes loudest. When nobody is speaking, when the room is quiet, when distractions disappear, when a person can finally hear the thoughts they have been avoiding, they may have sat alone for a while. They may have looked at their life and suddenly realized how many decisions had been made without asking what they truly felt. But again, feeling something does not justify betrayal. If their marriage is unhappy, that is something they must address honestly within their own life. If their marriage is healthy, they must respect it. Either way, you are not responsible for fixing it. You are not responsible for rescuing them. You are not responsible for waiting for them. And you certainly should not carry guilt for feelings that existed between two human beings. Sometimes people meet at the wrong time. Sometimes they meet while one person is unavailable. Sometimes they meet before either person is emotionally prepared. Sometimes a connection is powerful but still not meant to become a relationship. And sometimes people meet again years later after circumstances have genuinely changed. But you cannot build your present around a hypothetical future. You have today. You have your own dreams, your own growth, your own friendships, your own goals, your own story. Do not put all of that on hold. because there is something beautiful about becoming the person who no longer needs someone else's decision to feel complete. That person is powerful. That person is peaceful. That person can love without losing themselves. And perhaps that is exactly what this experience is trying to teach you. Your soulmate story may not be about getting someone. It may be about becoming someone. Someone who knows their value. Someone who can recognize healthy love. Someone who understands boundaries. Someone who does not confuse intensity with compatibility. Someone who does not mistake secrecy for intimacy. Someone who knows that genuine love can survive honesty. And perhaps the person you are thinking about is learning those lessons too. Maybe last night forced them to look at the difference between what they want and what they are willing to take responsibility for. That distinction could change them, but whether it changes them enough to make different choices is their responsibility, not yours. You cannot grow for another person. You cannot heal for another person. You cannot make another person brave. You cannot make another person honest. You can only decide who you will be. And maybe that is the shocking part of this entire message. The shocking thing may not be what they did. The shocking thing may be what their realization awakens in you, because perhaps you have been waiting for external confirmation when you already know the truth inside yourself. You know what kind of love you want. You know what kind of treatment you deserve. You know whether secrecy makes you uncomfortable. You know whether uncertainty has exhausted you. You know whether you have been holding on to a story because it gives you hope or because you genuinely believe it is healthy for you. Be honest with yourself. You do not need to punish yourself for caring. You do not need to erase your memories. You do not need to pretend the connection meant nothing. But you can release the need to control the ending. That is freedom, and sometimes freedom is the greatest answer. Perhaps last night was a turning point for them. Perhaps they realized that pretending everything was simple would never make it simple. Perhaps they recognized that someone from their past still represented an unanswered chapter. But an unanswered chapter does not necessarily need to become a new chapter. Sometimes you read the final page and understand the lesson, then you close the book, and sometimes you discover that the story was never finished. But if a new chapter ever appears, it must begin with honesty, not secret messages, not hidden meetings, not emotional betrayal, not promises made in private while commitments remain intact elsewhere. A genuine new beginning requires a clean beginning. Until then, protect your heart. There is no shame in doing that. You may feel tempted to search for clues. You may want to know whether they thought about you. You may want to know whether they mentioned your name. You may wonder whether last night's event was the beginning of something. But be careful. A mind searching desperately for certainty can turn every small coincidence into a prophecy. You do not need to live that way. You can remain open without becoming obsessed. You can believe in love without surrendering your judgment. You can believe in spiritual meaning without assuming that every emotion is a divine command. You can listen to your intuition while still respecting reality. That balance will protect you, and perhaps there is another truth waiting for you. The person you are meant to share your future with should not require you to compete with someone else's marriage. The right relationship should not begin with you wondering whether you are the reason someone breaks their commitment. The right relationship should have room for honesty from the beginning. If someone ever becomes available in the future, let them become available honestly. Let them make their own decisions. Let them resolve their own responsibilities. Then, if circumstances genuinely align, you can decide what is right for you. Until then, keep your heart open to life, because something wonderful happens when you stop treating one person as your only possible future. Your world becomes larger, you notice opportunities, you meet people, you discover talents, you build confidence. You begin to enjoy your own company, and one day, you may look back and realize that the person you were waiting for was never the entire story. They were one part of it, maybe an important part, maybe a painful part, maybe a beautiful part, but still only one part. You are the one who continues. You are the one who grows. You are the one who decides what happens next. So if something happened last night, let it be a reminder rather than a command. Let it remind you that human hearts are complicated. Let it remind you that unfinished emotions can resurface. Let it remind you that people sometimes realize things long after they should have. But most importantly, let it remind you that your future does not have to depend on another person's confusion. You can move forward, you can forgive, you can release, you can hope, you can love, and you can still choose yourself. There is a quiet strength in that choice. It does not make your feelings fake, it makes you responsible for them. Perhaps your soulmate, or the person you once believed was your soulmate, is also standing at a crossroads. Maybe they have realized something about their past. Maybe they have realized something about their marriage. Maybe they have realized something about themselves, but the crossroads belongs to them. Your road belongs to you. Do not abandon your road to stand at someone else's crossroads. Keep walking, keep growing, keep becoming. Because if your paths are ever supposed to meet again, you will not need to destroy yourself to make it happen. And if they never meet again, you will still arrive somewhere beautiful. That is the promise you can safely make to yourself. Your life will continue. Your heart will heal, your future will unfold, and love will not be limited to one person's ability to recognize you. You are not running out of time. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are not less valuable. Because someone chose another path, sometimes another person's choice is not a measurement of your worth. It is simply their choice. And you are allowed to choose differently. Choose peace. Choose honesty. Choose self-respect. Choose growth. Choose relationships that are available and reciprocal. Choose people who can stand beside you openly rather than keeping you in uncertainty. Choose a future where you do not have to decode every silence. That is the kind of love worth waiting for. And perhaps that is what last night's revelation was really preparing you to understand. Not that someone married secretly belongs to you. Not that you should interfere, not that you should sit by the phone waiting for a confession, but that even the most complicated emotional connection can teach you something about what your heart truly needs. Maybe you needed to know that you can feel deeply. Maybe you needed to know that you can survive uncertainty. Maybe you needed to learn that love without boundaries can become painful. Maybe you needed to discover that your heart deserves a safe place to land. and perhaps you are finally ready for that. The story does not have to end in heartbreak. It can end in wisdom. It can end in peace. It can end with you standing taller than you did before. And if the universe, life, or your faith brings someone into your future, let that person meet the stronger version of you, not the version who waited endlessly, not the version who accepted crumbs, not the version who believed love required suffering. Let them meet the version who knows that love should bring clarity. Let them meet the version who knows that commitment matters. Let them meet the version who understands that real connection does not need manipulation. Let them meet the version who can say, I care about you, but I also care about what is right. That is strength. That is love with wisdom. That is emotional maturity. And maybe somewhere tonight, the other person will remember you again. Maybe they will wonder how you are. Maybe they will think about the past. Maybe they will realize that you mattered more than they admitted. If that happens, let it happen. You do not have to chase the thought. You do not have to force the conversation. You do not have to turn their memory into your mission. Let their feelings belong to them. Let your life belong to you. There is something deeply peaceful about realizing that you can love someone and still let them go. You can care about someone and still maintain boundaries. You can believe a connection was meaningful and still refuse